what's up you guys, this is Rob. Hey, what's up you guys, this is Rob from Viver Gate Plays, and today on the Daily Grind, we're gonna go over 5 signs that might make you a veteran. Alright, so I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I totally got caught out in a comment yesterday, which is what inspired this video. Nick Evans said, how to tell he's an old school player, he still calls Toxic Lash Contagion. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Contagion was actually the original name of Saren's Toxic Lash, and I was like, damn, I feel old. And he just reminded me of all of the things that I've experienced in this game that some of the newer players might not realize, and that's exactly what kind of brought about this video. However, before we begin, I do want to preface this with a little bit of a disclaimer. When I say veteran, I don't necessarily mean that someone is better or worse than anybody else. I don't believe that being a veteran changes your skill level. I mean, it gives you more time to have played with the game and hopefully your skill level is more, but just like mastery rank, I don't think that your veteran status necessarily makes you a more skilled player, because I know some people get really sensitive to that, and there's a lot of people out there that are very much like, oh, you're a veteran, so you think that you're better than other people. I'm like, no, I think I'm better than other people because I'm better than other people. That's terrible. The one thing that veterans do have over some of the general public is the fact that we have been through some shit. We have experienced some stuff. There have been major changes in this game. You guys, there's a lot of people that are butthurt about Xeneric right now, but we had Damage 1.0, I think a little bit longer than we've had the focus system, and trust me, those were massive changes. However, let's go ahead and jump into some of the ways we can tell that we are veterans. So starting things out, if you are like me and are still a little bit salty over the Gradivus dilemma, then you might just be a veteran. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is what I feel has been the most epic kind of event that DE has thrown. Basically what it all boils down to is it was almost like an invasion event. You had to pick one of two sides. So this is what would happen. The Corpus have found a whole bunch of Tenno and Cryo Sleep and are intending on keeping them. The Grineer are very, very angry at the fact that, you know, the Corpus are violating some sort of deal that they had, but the Grineer are using that as an excuse to enslave the local population and all of the, like, settlements over there. So it's kind of like, alright, so save the Tenno or save these innocent citizens. Now, for me, a part of me was like, well, they're innocent citizens. And at this point in time, you know, we haven't run into the Myconians. We haven't heard of anything like Cetus in the past. So nobody is really attached to these, you know, colonists that we had to save. So everybody was jumping on the Grineer side. They're like, get all the Tenno out of there. Get all the Tenno out of there. And I'm like, but the citizens, they're going to enslave the citizens. Don't you understand that the Grineer are the bigger, scarier, overwhelming force in the system? We need to stop them. So the event basically had the community split. And if you supported the Grineer side, you would get one set of the rewards. And if you were supporting the Corpus side, and whichever side won would get the reward. So you had like a Corpus set, and then you had a Grineer set. Well, I don't want the Grineer set, because the Grineer set was ugly as fuck. It was called the Brack, and it was nasty. And on the Corpus side, we had the Detron, and I think like the Prova Vandal or something like that. And I was like, okay, I want these ones, these are so much cuter, but nobody wanted to support that side. So basically what happened is, whichever side that the community more sided on, when I say the community, I mean the entire community. You couldn't pick, like if the community decided on one side and you didn't like their prizes, you were stuck with the blueprints of those prizes. And that's the issue there. The people who sided with the Grineer would get the actual items straight out of the gate. So they would have the Brack delivered directly to them, and then they would get an insignia, and they would also get the Machete Wraith. But if you supported the Corpus side and the Grineer one, you would just get blueprints of all of that shit, right? So I was like, ugh. So now I gotta help the goddamn Grineer turret. I was so pissed, was so angry. And the thing about this is the community raged at each other. The community literally, I remember making propaganda videos, and I remember Xenogelion and like them doing all of these interviews of different YouTubers and different people within the community to see like who they were supporting. And it was just this weird energy in the community where everybody was riled up and they were like, you dirty Grineer supporters, you dirty Corpus supporters, and everybody was just going back and forth, and the forums were just like flooded. And I mean, it was bad because we were arguing, but it was also really, really spirited and really, really excited. I'm still bitter to this day that I just didn't stick to the corpus side and get the cool corpus like insignia. I always forget what they're called, like the regalia that sits on your arm. Yeah, I'm kind of bitter that I didn't just stick to that side, but you know, I was a YouTuber back then, so I had to do reviews and stuff, and I'm like, well, I don't have the plat to rush all of this, and I don't really have the components to build all of this myself, so I guess I'm just gonna have to cop out and stick with the fucking Grineer. So I'm bitter that I don't have that insignia. I'm really, really angry, and I definitely still harbor some resentment towards the ugly turd gun, the Brack. And we have the Maradetron, and it's beautiful and gorgeous, so take that, ugly, stupid Brack. Next up, if you internally wince when you hear the name Viver Gate, you might just be a veteran. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what Viver Gate was, oh my god, it was like the biggest drama in the history of all of Warframe. And trust me, we've had some dramas, but Viver Gate was like the be-all end-all, and a part of me is kind of like, I almost don't want to bring it up just because we've referred to it as the update that didn't happen. It's like the update that was literally just reverted because it was so bad. So the backstory behind Viver Gate is basically syndicates were just introduced. And because of the fact that we're gamers, we wanted to game the system. At that point in time, we had no cap as to how much syndicate reputation we could earn, but I believe that the earnings at that point were not necessarily that great. We didn't have any syndicate quests or anything like that, so a lot of us just went out to go grind the shit out of syndicate points, right? Well, there became a little bit, I guess you would say, a little bit of an exploit on a node in Eris called Viver. Was it on Eris? Regardless, it's a node called Viver, and it was an interception node. Now, the interception node was basically the Corpus tile set, like the in-ship tile set, but the node placement was a little bit different. Different to the point that you could absolutely cheese it with a Radial Javelin Excalibur, Polarized Mag. This was like original Polarized Mag, not our Polarized Mag now. The Polarized Mag that was OP as fuck. And then you would use a Trinity, or in my case, I actually used a Limbo to kind of like work a little Limbo magic on the whole thing. But this was the first time that we have ever seen, and it's the first and only time, I'm gonna be frank with you, that we've ever seen DE act out of like, oh, I don't even want to say it because they're nice Canadian people, but this was the first time that they acted out of malice. Like, I was like, ooh, I was like, they nerfed Trinity, they nerfed Mag, they nerfed Excalibur, they found the exploit that I was using for Limbo, and they were like, gone, get rid of it all. They changed the node I think became like a defense or something. They moved around any other tile set that had that same setup, was like everything was moved out and stretched across, and they're like, we're making polarized, I think line of sight, radial javelin could not pass through, what is it called? Radial javelin could not pass through solid items. So basically if you radial javelin and there was like, I don't know, some terrain in the way, you couldn't hit enemies off of that. It would just stick into the walls. I forgot what they did to Trinity, but let's be real. They fucking have nerfed Trinity so many times that it's absolutely ridiculous. You might be a veteran if you remember Trinity making everybody invincible like map-wide. That's another one. But it was the first time that DE had ever come down that hard. It was really bad. They were like, okay, so we give you this new system and you fucking exploit the shit out of it. Done. And it was so bad that DE actually reverted everything the very next day. And you could tell that they acted like rash. Like, I've never, and you guys know, like, I love DE and I love the staff, you know, they're all great, but that was the first and only time we have ever seen them do that. I'm telling you, look up videos of Viver Gate just to immerse yourself in Warframe history. And beyond that, so if y'all ever think that DE is doing something mean or something bad, just look up Viver Gate, remind yourself of what happens when you piss DE off. Because I don't know what y'all did. We hit a button and DE was like, fuck you guys. And we're like, a Canadian cussed at us. What is this? This is not something that can happen. But a part of me was a little bit like, wow, this is magical. This is not something you see every day. So I was kind of sitting back eating my popcorn, and I was like, I know that they were going to nerf my limbo. I know that they were going to nerf the energy regeneration on that. I'm cool, like I get it, it happens. But that was the one and only time we had ever seen DE lash out in that level. And that's why I always suggest that you guys be very, very nice, because you never want to see that ever again. Moving along from that, we're actually going to go even further back. If you remember Laser, Force Field, Armor Piercing, and Serrated Blade damage, you might just be a veteran. You'd have to be a veteran. So for those of you guys who don't know, it is literally damage 1.0. This was the beginning of all of the different damage types that we had, and then they actually graduated into damage 2.0, which is the system that we currently have now. But damage 1.0, listen, I'm gonna be completely frank with you. I just started doing YouTube videos at that point in time. I didn't really know all of the stuff, so I didn't really understand damage types and how damage types work. But I think that a lot of people didn't understand how damage types work either. There were only two damage types that really mattered, and that was Serrated Blade damage and Armor Piercing damage. And those were the two that bypassed enemy armor. And the thing is that's really fucking weird, I believe that like almost every enemy had some form of armor, but back in those days when I was using Vauban like nobody's business, and we were sitting there on Xeni defense, because that's, you know, because now I think, what do we have now? We have Hydron and we have Stoffler, like those are our two kind of like places, and you know, to another extent, Akkad, people use that one a lot too, but Xeni was like our spot. And literally I would sit there on hours upon hours with my Vauban just throwing Bastilles in the same spot over and over and over again. And if y'all remember the days when Vauban's Bastille had no limit to the amount of enemies it could carry in it, you might just be a veteran as well. But I was sat up there with my Acrid, because I believe poison damage also bypassed armor, and my Flux Rifle, I put tons of Forma into those things, and I was like 6 Forma into my Acrid, and I was like bapping all of those ancients, and it was absolutely crazy. We would just sit there for hours on hours, wave after wave after wave, and we would use Serrated Blade damage or Toxin damage or Armor Piercing damage, because those were the ones. But I just laughed because I remembered Force Field damage? The Kogake had Force Field damage? Like, really, DE? What was up with that? And then we had laser damage. I believe it was like Diamond Skin that was actually the original laser damage resistance. I was like, what is going on here? But it was definitely one of those things that remind you, when you hear Serrated Blade, when you hear Armor Piercing, like all of those things definitely harken back to the damage 1.0 system, which I'm glad is gone, because I almost feel like this new system that we have now, which damage 2.0, is just far more transparent, and we have little insignias, and we know what the fuck is going on. Legitimately, if you think that now it's hard, that we have to keep track of so much stuff and we have to go to the wiki, like, I wouldn't even know how you would keep track of Serrated Blade damage, Armor Piercing damage, and laser damage back in the days. I don't even think that we had formulas, but DE has graduated and become a little more transparent and provided us things in the codex so that we can understand the game just a little bit better, which is definitely nice. So I do feel kind of bad, because I did say that this was like only 5 things that might make you a veteran, but legitimately we've got a couple combo ones coming up, and the first one is, if you remember the phrase, event to win, you might just be a veteran. Now, oh my god, like way back in the day, you have to understand that back in the day, our primes were not all that great. Our primed weapons were not like the fantastical mythical beasts like the Galatine Prime or the Tigris Prime or any of those. We didn't have anything crazy cool like that when it came to primes. It was just like, oh, it's okay. Like, that stuff is fine, I guess. But legitimately, the best weapons in game came from events. And you are going to be in disbelief when I say this out loud, because you're going to be like, what the fuck, Rob? Were times really that tough for you guys back then? And the answer is yes. Times were definitely that tough for us back in the day. Legitimately, when I first came into the game, I was a part of this one event, and I really wasn't in that deep with the game. So, you know, I was like, oh, there's a competitive event. I don't really give a shit about it. Of course, that event contained Prime Chamber, so fucking bless my heart right there. And what also happened is the Snipetron Vandal became available. So I kind of did some of the stuff in the event. I participated just a little bit. And what ended up happening is, oh, I got this reward. And I was like, oh, I've got a Snipetron. That's great. And I was like, where did this Snipetron come from? And they're like, oh, it's from the event. Didn't you read the patch notes? And as I was going through, I was like, I could have gotten a Snipetron Vandal had I only killed, you know, X, Y, and Z more enemies. I was so angry. So recently when the Snipetron Vandal came out, I was like, I have you now. And then I got my hands on it. I was like, ooh, you are really crap now. You are really, really bad. But back in the days, legitimately, we got things like the Strun Wraith. We got some amazing weapons from all of these events. So the big thing is, whenever they threw an event, you had to be there in order to have like the best weapons in game. Now, of course, we have the primes and all of that kind of stuff, and it kind of, you know, it kind of puts the event weapons to shame, but oh my god, they were absolutely fantastic back in the day. And it was one of those things where you like check the patch notes every single time. You're like, all right, so when is this event coming up? I need to make sure that I'm not working. I need to make sure that I'm on and able to fulfill all of the things that I need to fulfill. And let's be real too, I'm gonna do another throwback here. If you used a rainbow build on that event weapon, then you probably were a veteran. Now, this is another thing that we're pulling from Damage 1.0, but we did have all of the elemental mods back then, but the elemental mods, I don't believe they combined in any way, shape, or form, so there was no like corrosive, there was no blast, none of that. But because of the fact that we didn't have really high statistical weapons, you know, we didn't have the Soma Primes, we didn't have the shotguns with a lot of status on them, we didn't have all those really interesting statistically modded weapons, you know, none of them. We just had like base damage and fire rate and reload, and those were the ones you really paid attention to. So what we did was we would just slap on all of the elements, and then we would just like shoot enemies with that, and that's what they called the rainbow build, because it had every element on it, because we had space for it, and we didn't have any weapons that really well utilized the supplemental stats. So that's a whole part of the whole event to win thing. If you put a rainbow build on your event weapon, you were probably a veteran. And for our very, very last one, this story is actually very, very close to my heart. It's another 2-in-1, but basically, if Loki was your starter frame, then you were definitely a veteran. So for those of you guys who don't know, Loki was actually one of the original starter frames. It used to be Excalibur, Mag, and Loki, but a lot of people found that Loki was maybe a little too advanced for people to start off with. And I know that some of you guys are going to be like, Loki advanced? Like, whatever, you just go invisible and you radial disarm things. It's not that hard. Well, here is the second part of that whole mix. If you remember having 10 mod slots and abilities being mods that you had to slot in, then you were also definitely a veteran. So let me share with you my story of how I started out in Warframe. So in previous games, I'd always played rogue characters. I loved being invisible. I loved being able to, you know, kind of like hide and sneak attack enemies and all of that kind of stuff. So Loki was just like the natural choice for me. I was like, cool, let's go ahead and get Loki. My first day into the game, I was literally running around, I was shooting things. I only I didn't realize how to not play solo. So I was playing solo as Loki. I was trying to level up. Here's the thing. So we did have the mod capacity stuff, but I didn't know about mods. So, Loki, with the lowest, I believe at that time he had the lowest base health, the lowest base shield, and he had like one of the lowest armors out there. I'm running around this little Loki with starter weapons, right? And I'm like, okay, why can't I go invisible? And I was soloing these missions, and I was like, I don't know why I'm not getting abilities. I don't understand what any of this is. How is this working? Why, like, I picked this guy because he's supposed to be stealthy, but I like literally can't kill anything. I was super upset. I burned my starting plat on revives. I literally sat there looking at my screen. I was like, well, I'm out of revives, so I guess I'm done for the day. I guess I'm just done. I was super upset, but the next day I was like, okay, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna come back, we're gonna start this again. That day I discovered how to like go with teams. And so here I was, and I was super pissed off because I was a level 30 Loki, max rank Loki, no mods. No mods, no invisibility, no nothing. Still did not understand how anything worked. And I was just super frustrated. And this is going to be a little bit of a throwback too. I had to go search up videos on the YouTubes, and I discovered myself a little bit of a AKA Mike B, and I went ahead and jumped in on that, and I was like, okay, I get how this works now. I have to put the mods in, and then I get, then I get the abilities and all of that kind of stuff, and I was like, all right, now I've at least got a base understanding. So if y'all remember AKA Mike B, you might just be a veteran as well. But that's how it started out. So for those of you guys who didn't quite catch that in the flurry of writing, we had Loki used to be a starter frame. Now we have Volt, which is a little bit, which I feel like is a lot easier actually, because you get, the electric shield to block damage, and you get all of your abilities automatically. That's not something that we had to do back in the day. Literally, we had to slot in each and every one of our abilities, and they would be a mod card. And actually, if you remember, a lot of people only used 2 abilities back in the day because they wanted to have the full-on 8 slots for the rest of their kit. So listen, y'all who are crying over Xeneric now and having to put some efficiency mods in, we had it tougher way back in the day, okay? So if you wanted to use all 4 of your abilities, I believe that only left you with 6 mod slots open. So cry me a river, alright? So that about does it for this episode. Let me know if any of you guys have any of these you're a veteran if statements, because honestly it's really fun to kind of reflect back on all of the things that happened back in the day, especially with kind of like the recent events and all of the changes that are happening. It kind of reminds you, there was a time before all of the cool things that we have now that is much rougher than the state that we're in right now. Literally for me, whenever I hear some of the complaints that are happening from some of the newer players, and this isn't to like shit on newer players in any way, shape, or form, but I'm kind of like, you don't even know how it was back in the day. And I'm not saying that we should go back to back in the day, but a part of me is like, listen, the things you're complaining about, very minor in the grand scheme of things. Regardless, let me know if you have any of those in the comments below, and I'm gonna leave you guys. So as always, love somebody, hurt nobody, and touch yo body. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.